Meanwhile, in the Swamp, the Billy Napier era begins with a home game against the defending Pac-12 champs, number 7 ranked Utah. It all goes down at 7 o'clock Saturday night, and two very different squads in terms of expectations. The Utes view this as the beginning of a journey toward, hopefully, fingers crossed, a playoff bid, while the Gators are hoping to set the tone early and put last year behind them. Let's welcome in two guys who know a lot about this matchup. Jacob Rudner from Swamp 24/7 and Steve Bartles from UteZone.com. Guys, I just laid it out. This one means a whole lot to both of these programs, but I want you to make the case for who needs it more, and Jacob, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say just by virtue of Utah being a playoff contender, they definitely need it more. But this is certainly an important start for Florida in general. Obviously, with the Billy Napier getting going, getting a win over a top 10 opponent would probably do wonders for a brand new coaching staff and enough to get the legs of this Florida football team under it. I think it's also a good test to kind of see what this team has and what it doesn't. Let Anthony Richardson in his first year as a starter get things going against a very formidable defense, a disciplined team like Utah. So I would say it's important for both sides, but given the expectations for Utah this season, it's probably more important for them.
Yeah, and obviously it is still just an out-of-conference game, and Utah will still be able to accomplish great things regardless of the outcome of this game. However, this is a very significant game for Kyle Whittingham and the Utes. It is the goal. If the goal is to truly contend for the college football playoff, in a lot of ways, this is a must-win for Utah. Having a victory over the Florida Gators, an SEC team that's looking to get back on track as a national contender, that'd provide Utah with a potential ace in hand type of win when you start reviewing resumes at the end of the season. Now, every win is valuable, but we've learned over the years how valuable these cross-conference games can be. Oregon benefited from a win over Ohio State last season, which in turn benefited Utah down the stretch. And then just beyond the scope of this season itself, Utah's a program vying for greater respect nationally, and that respect is so important and valuable in this ever-changing landscape of college football. So in a lot of ways, the big picture here is a big factor for Utah and why this is a must-win game.
Certainly, it's one of the oldest cliches in the sport. The game is won and lost in the trenches. Now, the battle we're all keeping our eyes on is between Florida's offensive line and Utah's defensive front. Steve, who do you think has the advantage here?
You know what? This is an interesting battle. And when you look at the resume of both groups, it's each one has a very important, a very valuable case to bring to the table. Coach Whittingham at the helm, the goal is to always control the line of scrimmage, and Utah will enter with a starting defensive front that has to replace a couple longtime figures over the last couple of years. But this is a front that has a lot of talent, has a lot of potential, and it starts with Pac-12 defensive freshman of the year, Junior Tafuna. He'll anchor the interior of the line, as well as Van Fillinger, a defensive end who really came on strong down the stretch for Utah when they were making their run in November and December. So, it's going to be dependent upon those two, and beyond them, Utah has a lot of depth, a lot of talent, a lot of potential, and they'll utilize that depth. And that's going to be the big key for Utah in this matchup with Florida, is utilizing that depth and versatility. So, it's easy to look at this on paper and give Florida the edge, but Utah has a lot of potential in that defensive front.
No, and that's certainly important. I think that the one of the big themes of this game is going to be whether or not Florida will be able to open up enough running room offensively in order for it to be able to successfully do what Billy Napier is setting out to do as a play caller. Billy Napier is in charge of this Florida offense. We know he's going to want to run the ball potentially as much as 60% of the time. He ran the ball over 55% of the time in his final season at Louisiana, had 3 guys rush for over 600 yards. And there's really no indication that he is going to stray away from the run game in Gainesville. He has 4 serviceable running backs. He plans to use all of them. I think this is a situation where it will be very interesting to see against Kyle Whittingham's defense what the Gators are going to be able to do with their offensive line. Will they be able to open up enough holes in order to get that run game going? That is one of the biggest tests. They were able to do it last year. Does the success now carry over to 2022 with a new coaching staff and a new scheme in place? And then on the defensive side of the football, we know Utah likes to run. They've done so successfully, had an 1,100-yard rusher last season. There's no indication that they want to slow that down. So I think it'll be very interesting to see whether or not Florida's thin defensive front is going to be able to keep up and slow that run game down. It could come down to whether or not they're able to do so.
All right, you guys are the experts. I'm just the one asking the question, so let's keep it pretty broad here. What's one key matchup that fans should keep their eye on? Jacob, starting with you.
Yeah, I think it's whether or not Florida's middle linebackers are going to be able to keep pace with Utah's tight ends. They have two extremely talented players at that position and utilize them in a unique way. They have tight ends playing out of wide receiver alignments. They can cause problems for opposing teams, and they did so on several occasions last year. And there's nothing to say that they aren't going to try and do that again. It's a thin inside linebacker unit for the Gators this season. Whether or not they're going to be able to keep up with such high-level players at that tight end position is probably one of the bigger questions that will follow Florida throughout its season, not just in this matchup, but it will be particularly important whether or not Ventrell Miller and Amari Burney can keep pace for the Gators with those very talented tight ends.
Yeah, I think that matchup is going to be, a big key in this game, and it's going to be a wildly entertaining matchup, and not just the Utah tight ends versus the linebackers, but the safeties, I'm sure, will also be mixed into that as well. So, for Utah, their tight end personnel is a big strength. It wasn't necessarily the key to their success last season, but it was a major contributing factor to it. And Utah's two star tight ends, Brant Kuithe and Dalton Kincaid, provide dynamic ability in the passing game, but they're also very important in Utah's run blocking schemes, and they prove to be pretty effective, as blockers, and they complement each other quite well. So you have those two. It starts with those two, but even beyond that, Utah has personnel beyond them. Logan Kendall is a player that may not show up in the box score with catches or carries as a fullback, but much like Cole Fotheringham last season, he played a very important role in generating movement up front in the run game. So Logan Kendall can be a player like that. Thomas Yasmin is another rugged athlete, has a background in rugby, and he can be utilized in a similar sort of way where he can be featured in the run game. And then, Utah has a former USC Trojan wide receiver, Munir McClain, who actually made the move to tight end, and he adds a little intriguing option to the group as well. So Utah's, it's not just that they have two really good players at the top of the list, but they have depth and they have various skill sets where they can, exploit various matchups and find favorable ones too. So it's certainly a strength for Utah, and it's going to be a big battle in this game against Florida.
Guys, thank you so much for the great conversation. Learned a whole lot, and be sure to keep it locked in all season long on Swamp 24/7 and UteZone.com. Also, be sure to check out their coverage of this big game.